Hello and welcome to session 6 already. Can you believe it? It's 6 of 7 sessions. I can't believe it. It's gone so fast. Of basically dealing with health anxiety, and stress. And tonight's session, I am focusing on how to deal with anxiety and depression in COVID-19 times. So I'm going to dive straight in because I've got some really good gritty stuff this evening. And I'm going to start with looking at anxiety very briefly because we have talked a lot about anxiety this week. And if you want more details, then good evening, Laura. Then do go back to session 1 and 2 because there's quite a lot of information on there. But in a nutshell, I want to just wrap up anxiety tonight before we go into the solution tomorrow evening. So anxiety is triggered by the good old chemical stress. Now, the majority of the Western world, believe it or not, are living at some level of stress continuously, but they don't realize. That's what's happened to our stressful life has become totally normal. And the reason for that is because we don't stop. We're like constantly on a rat race. And it's really interesting because we've been forced into this kind of lockdown scenario and situation. Some of the things that I'm hearing is that people don't know what to do with themselves because they're so used to like continuously being almost on the run. And so now they're stopping and they're realizing like they've been left to face with themselves. They're there on their own with their own heads and their thoughts and the TV screen and their mobile phones. And if they're not got the TV on, listening to the news, downloading information, or if they haven't got the mobile phone on, then suddenly they're left with the aftermath of this kind of like M1 feeling of thoughts coming towards them and attacking them, and people don't know what to do because they've never taken time, the majority of people, good evening Carol, to know how to deal with the intensity of our own selves, because we have never been taught generally how to spend time on going inwards and actually mastering our own relationship with ourselves, which is just crazy, right? We are told to do all these things like decide who you want to be. Good evening, John. By the age of like 10 years old, you know, you've got to decide what GCSEs you're going to start taking and who you want to be as an adult and all these pressures. And yet none of us have been told how to actually spend some quality time on putting our attention on going inwards and getting to have a relationship with ourselves, which is crazy nuts. Anyway, I'm going to help change that this evening by focusing on anxiety and depression, and finally finish on it off this evening with an antidote. So giving you some really hardcore direct steps to be able to, you can implement from tonight basically, to make some changes to your life. And by the way, before I started, my middle son came in and went, "Mum, you're not going to wear that hoodie, are you? It's a bit bright." And I was like, yes I am. So apologies for my almost cerise pink hoodie, but that's how I'm going this evening. Alright, so let's do a little recap on anxiety. And as I just said before, if you want more information on the anxiety part, I have spent a lot of time this week really diving into the anxiety part on session 1 and 2, so do go and watch the replays. But stress, what is it? Well, stress knocks us out of what's called homeostasis, and that's a chemical imbalance. And what homeostasis really means is when we're firing on all cylinders. Good evening, Hayley. What happens to the mind and body is it goes into alignment and we basically are in our ultimate health. Our immune system is working, we feel great, we feel alive, we feel energetic, we feel fabulous. When we start creating large amounts of stress in our life, instantly that beautiful chemical cortisol starts flooding our experience, and it does it because it's been programmed to protect us. And what happens to us is we start to become out of balance in our own experience. So we get knocked out of homeostasis basically. The problem is as I said before, we are the only organism on the planet that can bring on the stress hormone by thought alone. So we can be sat at home on the sofa, mind our own business, and our minds can go off into some sort of future moment, start worrying about, I don't know, what it's going to be like when you go back to work, or perhaps stressing about finances right now, or juggling kids. And just by that thought alone, the subconscious mind has no idea that that's not happening now. So it just triggers the stress hormone immediately, which signals every cell of your body to tell it that you're under threat. So you're sat there, you mind your own business, you're watching TV, but your body thinks that you're basically going to war. And so it does what it does best, it starts protecting you. So it floods the body with this cortisol, you're then sat there and suddenly your heart starts to race. You start to sweat in all sorts of strange places and you feel completely overwhelmed. And yet all that's happened is you've taken your attention and you've put your mind into some thoughts that are not even happening now. It's not even real. It's like using your imagination in a negative way. So what is anxiety then? Basically, anxiety is when you are someone who is addicted to going into a future moment. So an anxious person tends to be more obsessed with future thinking. They don't tend to be so worried about past. They're more about taking potential information from the past and using that to hurl it into a future moment to create some sort of scenario situation that quite honestly has never even happened yet. But in your mind, it's like all these kind of like ideas and what's going to go wrong and a massive amount of what ifs. But what if this happens? And what if that happens? Good evening, Sheila. And so what happens is your mind takes you off into a fantasy, basically, into a fantasy in a future moment, and it starts creating scenarios that aren't real. But the body doesn't know that it's not happening now. So it starts triggering off these chemicals into your body like it is happening now and starts putting you into a state as though you are under threat. Now, short term, once or twice, now and then, in a week sort of period, not a problem, right? Because you've been set up, you've been programmed to be able to use these chemicals in your body to be able to get away from threatening situations. The problem is when this becomes more of a permanent experience. And what I mean by that is that the body forgets because you're constantly got your focus on some future moment that's not now, some negative outcome, some negative scenario. The body thinks that you are constantly under threat. And so then what happens is I always imagine it's like little taps in our brain, and it's like the cortisol taps get switched on, so the stress hormone gets switched on, and then it doesn't know how to switch itself back off again. And so then what happens is you are constantly feeling really overwhelmed and really anxious, and your body is reacting to those chemicals like you are under threat. And this is when people start having panic attacks, because it becomes so intense that it's like, it's almost like feels like you're going to explode, because there's too much of the chemical in your body and it needs to be able to have some sort of access to be able to get rid of it. And so long term, what this then leads to is dis-ease. So how it turns to dis-ease is quite simple. You've got two aspects of your body that's going on all the time. You've got your immune system, which quite frankly right now we really need it firing on all cylinders with what's going on currently in our world. But we've also got our maintenance part of who we are as well. So that's the part of you that's like constantly making sure that all the cells of your body are firing and wiring and working on all cylinders, that you're rejuvenating, that the cells of your body are just constantly working, that the blood is pumping around your body, that your digestive system's working, all that stuff that goes on, because your body's such a mean machine, seriously, a mean machine, and it knows what to do. But when you are constantly flooding it with cortisol, what it does to be able to make sure that it can keep you alive is it quite frankly goes, well, we need all the energy around here because, you know, Bob's under threat. He's constantly under threat. We need to make sure that we've got as much energy to keep him alive. And so what it does is it goes to the biggest resource, energy resource taker of your functions of your body, and it switches it off, which is your immune system. And so then what happens is, if your immune system is not switched on, very, very quickly, you then become an environment ready for any bacteria, any viruses to move in. Because like COVID-19 is not a predator, it's an opportunist. it can only survive in environments, aka bodies, that are having the immune system switched off. It can't survive. It would never be able to get through the protection of a normal human being's immune system that was working on all cylinders, because it's just too advanced and too good. But when your immune system starts to lower, then wonderful. Then it's just open to bacteria and to viruses moving in. And that's what happens. Simple. So the number one thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we make our relationship to keeping our immune system firing on all cylinders right now number one. And it's really interesting, because what I've really noticed recently is, because of what's going on currently on our social media and on our TV, there is a huge amount of fear going on, because there's so much unknown. And so the mind loves that, right? It grabs it and it takes it and it chucks it into a future moment and comes up with a million different outcomes, generally not very positive. Because what's happening is we're taking bits of information off the news, we're chatting to people on social media, we're reading Facebook, we're going onto Instagram, we're back to the news, we're listening to our parents, we're calling our friends, and we're taking the mind's taking bits of information from it all, and it's creating its own jigsaw puzzle. It's creating its own story. But the truth is what it's doing is it's creating a fantasy based on bits of information that we don't even really know are fully true. And it's projecting it then into a future moment that isn't now, by the way. It's in a week's time, it's in 10 weeks' time, it's in a year's time, it's in 2 years' time. And it's then creating the worst case scenario. So we then focus on the worst case scenario, and because all your thoughts are attached, you can't have a thought without an emotion. They come simultaneously, whether it's the emotion that comes first and then you get the thought, or whether it's the thought and then you get the emotion. They are always in alignment of each other. So you don't get a happy thought and an emotion or a chemical release like cortisol together. They don't go together. If you have a happy thought, you get a happy chemical. If you get a sad thought, you get a sad chemical release. They just are always in alignment with each other. So if your attention and focus is constantly on fear, constantly on the worst case outcome, you can see what's going to happen very quickly to your environment. You are going to create lots and lots of cortisol, which the first thing it's going to do in long spurts is it's going to turn your immune system off. And then you are more likely to catch this COVID-19. So my advice to you is, A, don't panic about what I've just said, and B, realise that you have the ability, honestly, your body is so amazing and it has the ability to be able to protect you, look after you, but what your job is to become really conscious about where you are spending your attention, where you're putting it. And I'm going to talk to you more about this at the end in the antidote. So, stress. Stress is the key here. It's the number one thing that's going to make your anxiety go through the roof. And it does that through a chemical reaction. You're not going mad. If you experience anxiety, it's a physiological experience. It's a biology. It's a chemical release. You're not going nuts. You really are experiencing it. But you also have the ability to change and shift that, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. So, anxiety. Anxiety is when we get lost in the future. So someone who's anxious is someone who tends to spend most of the time in the future. So what's depression then? Depression is like literally the opposite. Depression is somebody who gets obsessed with the past. So they tend to have negative, they tend to go back into the past and tend to be finding things that they feel that they haven't done well. So someone who suffers with depression will quite often feel or have the experience of feeling that that everywhere they look, they hit a brick wall, that there's no solution, they can't get out of their current problems. And no matter how hard they try, they feel that they're constantly banging themselves against a brick wall, and it almost gives them a sense of hopelessness. So there's a very dense feeling of feeling like they've got everything wrong and everything they touch is a disaster. And there's a very common commentary that people that suffer with depression have, which is very always about feeling, it's fairly victim modish and a bit like you know, like no matter what I do, it always goes wrong sort of feeling. No matter what I try to do, it never works out. And that's because what the mind does is it always goes back into past experiences and it finds things that haven't worked out for that person. And it does this by using, again, the subconscious mind. And if you want to know more about the subconscious mind, I did a big thing on it on session 2 and how the subconscious mind works. But in a nutshell, it's like a computer program. It runs like a computer program, and so it very quickly filters through that computer program and it finds scenario situations from the past to support whatever that person is focused on. So if the person's focused on things not going right for them, the mind will find things in the subconscious mind from the past where things haven't gone right for them. So they've now got hardcore evidence that backs up the feeling. So it feels very real. And that's why there's a sense when someone's experiencing depression, it can feel like you've almost been swallowed up in a hole and there's no way out. And if that's been your experience, don't worry. You haven't gone mad. There's a reason to this, and I'm going to give you some antidote and solutions of how you can shift yourself out of that vibration. So depression is a sense of feeling like you can't get things right, that you're in a hole, that your mind is very, very negative on you. It's very much like everything I touch, it doesn't go right. And there's also usually quite a lot of attachment to feeling like if somebody or a friend or a family member or someone that you know could just do this, then I might be able to shift out of my current situation. So there's usually a bit of an attachment to feeling like you need someone to be able to act or do something in a certain way, and then it would change your life. And because of that, when they don't do this, there's a huge gap. There's a gap between your expectation and what they do or don't do, and so then you feel incredibly let down and incredibly lonely and isolated, and this can really make somebody with depression feel like they're an island. And this is a big problem to depression, is it can feel very isolated and very like
disconnected.
like you're the only person. That's my Alexa. Like you're the only person going through this. You're not, and I'm going to give you some solutions in a minute, I promise you. So depression is so debilitating, and and anxiety is. They both are, because they're both opposite extremities, and quite often people will experience both of these. They won't just necessarily be somebody with a low mood. There'll be somebody that's got a low mood and can experience anxiety too, because one can trigger the other, and that's not uncommon either. But don't panic, right? Because what I want you to hear here is that as much as when you feel like you're in this hole and you can't get out, and as much as you feel like you potentially suffered with depression and anxiety for many, many years, I've worked with so many people now with anxiety and depression and panic attacks and chronic pain and all the above. And what I can tell you is there is a solution. And it's not because that you've done anything necessarily wrong or that you are a lesser human being. In fact, you're flipping amazing. But you've just probably never been shown what to do properly. And so there is then a sense of always trying something new and then feeling like you go flat on your face again. And unfortunately, when we have those experiences and we're somebody who tends to suffer with anxiety or depression, it's like the worst thing that could happen because it kind of supports where you're at and it makes you feel like, you see, this is why my world's just such a nightmare. And I totally relate, because once upon a time that was me, and once upon a time, you know, I was that girl that was having panic attacks and was completely anxious about everything and anything. So I totally and utterly understand where you're coming from, but my life couldn't be further away from that now. And that is purely because through a number of years of trying and being fortunate enough to have worked with some amazing conscious teachers around the planet, I've just worked out a way of being able to deal with this from the cause, not the effect. So what I mean by that was, for a long time I was trying to change things on my outside world. So I was trying to change the actual feeling, like I was trying to get rid of the feeling of anxiety because I didn't like it. Who does? Who does like feeling depressed? No one does, surely. No one likes feeling anxious, you know, it's horrible. And so for a long time I would be trying to just do anything to distract myself from the feeling. And so I'd do things like drink lots of alcohol and on a very regular basis, daily, and as early as possible, so that I didn't have to feel anything, in fact. Or I didn't end up spending money that I really didn't have. I would be, and on stuff that I didn't really, it would be a distraction, basically. And they're called distractive behaviours. I mean, they're very recognisable. Most of the planet are doing it all the time. Spending large amounts of money that we haven't got, drinking, taking drugs, sleeping around, having just doing things that don't really support our sanity, really, but doing it because we don't want to feel this stuff. And there's a reason for that, and that's because we have been programmed to move from pain to pleasure at whatever cost as human beings, and that we will do. We will do that at any cost, which is why the heroin addict who is addicted to a hardcore drug because they've probably generally got into the drug in the first place because there's been some intense emotion that they've wanted to suppress, and then unfortunately the drug has taken over their experience, and now the problem is they've got to deal with having to get a fix every day because of what the drug will do to them if they don't get the fix. So what they do, because the pain of that emotion coming back, or the pain of not having that fix, is they will behave in what we would potentially see as really unethical ways, like maybe stealing some money off an old lady or whatever it might be. The truth of the matter is they're so driven to move away from the pain of what's going on. That's why they will lower their standards to do and behave in that way to get that fix. So that's an extreme case of saying we'll do whatever it takes to move from pain to pleasure. But all of us all day long are constantly doing things to move away from any kind of pain. We don't like it. We don't deal with pain very well as humans. We're just I don't like this, get me away from it. And so unconsciously, we are continuously doing things to remove ourselves away from it until we become conscious enough to do something different. And that's what this is about, right? This is not about a quick fix. This is about growing and expanding as a human being, doing something different so that you get a different outcome on a more permanent, regular basis. Because it's okay if you just get a day off from depression or anxiety, that's fine. But surely you want a life off from it. Surely you want to regain who you are back from this kind of veil of illusion, if you like, of feeling continuously either up or down, or feeling like you can't cope, or feeling like it's just too much, whether you're experiencing anxiety or depression. Surely that's got to be what we all want. It's definitely what I want. So one of the things about depression is we tend to feel powerless. We tend to have an experience of feeling like we've lost our power. And quite often I see this a lot in clients with depression. It's like their identity or purpose has just been lost and hidden in the whole kind of experience of being lost in this intensity of feeling like, oh my goodness, I just, everything I touch turns to rubbish and there's no way out of this, and every kind of way I turn, I don't seem to have a solution. Right, well, if this is you, or you know someone, or potentially anxiety and depression is something that you either are currently experiencing or you know somebody is, then stay online, because I am now going to give you some direct moves that are going to help you shift from this experience into a more expansive experience of being in alignment with yourself, which is called homeostasis. So grab paper and pen, and if you don't have paper and pen, then you can rewind this back and watch it on the replay later on, because this is going to help you change how you feel from tonight. So, okay, one of the biggest problems that we experience as a human being is that most of us have been spending our lives in what's called resistance. So resistance, I always say, is a bit like this. We're constantly resisting the very things that we don't like, and that's going back to us being programmed to move from pain to pleasure. But when we're in resistance, the best way to explain resistance is a little bit like, imagine you've got a fireplace and you've got a roaring fire going, it's really beautiful, and then you come in and you've got a big bottle of petrol and you decide to chuck this petrol onto the fire and it goes, right? You know it's going to do that. Well, that's what resistance does, is it just causes that fire to go, it causes it to grow, it causes it to be bigger. And that's the same as whatever we put our attention on always gets bigger in our lives. So have you ever lost your car keys? And you've been like, oh my goodness, I've got a meeting to get to, I've got the kids drop off at school, and I just can't, what have I done with the car keys? And you're kind of driving yourself mental, trying to think really hard, Kirsty, what did you do with them? You must have put them somewhere. And it's like infuriating. And no matter how hard you think, you just can't find them. And then for whatever reason, you're distracted for a moment. Maybe the children ask you to do something, or you just for a moment, you put the concept down of being in sheer panic to be able to find these car keys. And suddenly, bang, the whole thing comes back to you, and you remember that just before you lost them, and 20 minutes before, the phone had rung and you decided to put them down in a safe place on your desk or whatever it might be. And you'll notice that the answer didn't come when you were really intensely trying to like force it out of yourself in resistance. The answer came when you got out of the way of yourself, when you got out of the way of your mind. Then the answer was downloaded. And if you think about any time when you've ever lost anything, every single time that you've ever remembered or the answers come to you, it's never been when you've been trying to force it. It's only ever shown up in your awareness when you've got out of the way of the problem. And this is a really good analogy to our lives. Most of us are trying to fix things continuously on the outside world with force. We're trying to fix things from our minds. And Einstein said that we're never going to get out of any problem in the same thinking in which we get into it. And I love that because it's so true. Most of us are trying to fix problems from the same vibrational state in which we got into it. And we can't. If you want a different result, you are going to have to do something different. And I am not joking, right? If you want a different result in life, no matter what it is that's going on in your life, you are going to have to do something different because what you've been doing has not been working. And that's because what we do is 90% of how we live our life today, we'll generally live it the same way tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And then we get so infuriated with ourselves when things haven't changed. We go, oh, I don't get it. But I was really trying hard. It's not true. We keep repeating the same behaviours and then we get infuriated that we still feel rubbish. And that's because we haven't done something different. So in order to get a different result, we have to do something different, simple as. So, depression and anxiety, the experiences of them happen to us because it is literally our bodies telling us that there's something going on that we need to change. Now, sometimes it might be our own internal relationship to things that are going on the outside. Sometimes it's about just letting things go. Sometimes it's about just doing something completely different, right? But in order for us to actually make the change, we have to address these things from the cause. Not the actual effect, which is the symptoms in which these things manifest in us. So they manifest as our heart racing, as feeling overwhelmed, as feeling like we want to hide. That's the manifestation. That's not the cause. That is just the reason. That's what's happened because of something else. So in order for us to get a different result, what we've got to start learning to do is we've got to start learning to go a little bit deeper, and we need to go to the cause. And when we go to the cause, then we've got more chance of making not just a change today, but a lasting change. So grab your paper and pen. I'm going to give you some hot tips now. Now, so for those of you that don't know me, that are online here, tomorrow I'm going to spend the session talking to you about the solution of this whole 7 days. This whole 7-day program that I've put on to people to talk about how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with health anxiety, how to deal with stress, depression, whatever it may be. And part and parcel of that tomorrow is that I really want to share with you 2 aspects that I'm really passionate about and that I use a lot with my VIP clients, my coaching clients, my group coaching clients, etc. That has, well, to date has had me get some amazing results with my clients. And the main reason I feel that I get these results is because we work with the cause. We don't work with the effect. I am interested in who people are, and I am interested in what symptoms people have, but I am so much more interested in why this particular thing started in the first place. Because in order to be able to get a lasting result, I need to know that so that we can change that. Once we change that and dissolve that, then this just disappears, because this is only ever going to be there because of this, if that makes sense. The cause is the reason the symptoms are there. Symptoms don't just show up. They may seem like they do out of the blue, but they don't. There's something behind it. And so tomorrow I'm going to be talking to you about two things. One is a process called the Freedom Alignment Method, which is a system that's taken me 15 years to develop, and it's been developed off the back of my own life, which I'm going to go into more detail tomorrow. But in a nutshell, I found myself 15 years ago in a real dire straight situation where I was experiencing lots of anxiety and lots of panic attacks. And like most of us, I did the normal thing. I trotted along to the doctors, and they don't actually have an anxiety tablet. So they tried to put me on antidepressants. And I was like, I'm not depressed. I'm not depressed. I'm anxious. I'm having panic attacks. But they didn't have an anxiety tablet. So they wanted me to go on some antidepressants. Anyway, to cut a long story short, this set me off on a massive soul-searching journey to want to find a solution, because I knew this wasn't going to be the answer. Antidepressants weren't going to sort my life out. My life was in a mess. And I knew that taking a tablet was not going to sort my life out. But I knew that there was got to be another way to live. And so it set me off on a massive, massive journey, which I'll tell you more about tomorrow. But what happened off the back of this is I ended up being very, very ill myself, and I ended up having a thyroid issue which developed into heart failure. And I healed myself through this process that I created called the Freedom Alignment Method, which is a combination of teachings that I've been taught by some amazing conscious teachers around the planet over the last 15 years. And I've married that up with working with hundreds of clients, maybe even thousands now, of clients with chronic pain, illness, disease, anxiety, depression over the last 10, 15 years, and seeing patterns in their behaviour, patterns in their illness, and patterns in their personality. And what happened is I started to realise very quickly that these patterns would relate to traumas, would relate to how people interacted with the world. And so it made me start thinking, if this was what the manifestation was for somebody, surely we could go back to the beginning and go to the cause and find out how to reverse engineer it, basically, and be able to then give somebody a solution, which is what I did. And so 15 years on, I now I totally sorted my own health out. I now work with lots and lots of people all around the world with anxiety, depression, physical pain, whatever it might be, using this system. And tomorrow evening I want to talk to you more about that. But what this system fundamentally does, it addresses the cause. So, have you got your pen and paper? Right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the antidote then tonight, about anxiety and depression. So, in a nutshell, the mind. And again, if you want to know more about the mind, I did a massive session on the mind on session 2. So you can go and watch the replay on that as well. The mind, the fundamental workings of the mind. Right, our mind is amazing. It is amazing. It's an amazing piece of kit. But most people's minds are running them rather than them running their minds. So what I mean by that is they're running off into future and past scenarios and thought patterns continuously, and people are listening to that voice within, which, by the way, is 90% of the time very, very negative, because it's been programmed to be like that to keep you alive. It's called the egoic mind, and it's been programmed to look for problems. That's its job. So no matter what the start of a situation is, no matter how positive it is, it will still find a problem. So it might be that you just won £1 million. I put you in a room on your own for 24 hours. You're very excited. You won £1 million. I tell you to go have a good think about it. And 24 hours later, you come out of that room going, oh my goodness, but I'm going to end up upsetting people because I'm not going to have enough money to help everyone. And if I help this person out, what happens if I get robbed now? People find out that I've got £1 million. And what the mind will have done is it will search for problems. It's just how it works, you know, that's its job. So the mind itself is what is an amazing piece of kit, right? It's wonderful. But most people are being led unconsciously by their mind. And so until we become consciously aware of what it is doing and how it operates and what we need to do to be able to be not affected by its negativity, then it can seem like our life is constantly led to doom and gloom. So the first part of being able to deal with any anxiety and depression is realising where you are putting your attention. And I always say to everybody, awareness precedes all change. And it absolutely does. Because until you become aware of how you are behaving and where you are putting your focus in your life, how can you change it? You can't be expected to change something that you're not aware of. It'd be crazy. So the first part is you taking the time, and no better time than now while you're in lockdown, to actually start asking yourself or becoming aware, where am I putting my attention when I'm feeling anxious? Where am I putting my attention when I'm feeling depressed? And what you'll start to see is a pattern. You'll start to see a pattern of thought patterns, and you'll start to see a pattern of obsessive thoughts. So you'll find that when you are feeling depressed, that you aren't usually thinking really lovely things. You are usually thinking about the worst case scenarios. You're usually thinking about how things are going to go wrong. When you're anxious, you'll probably find that you're always going, but what if this happens? And what if that happens? I was such a big what ifer. I used to be, oh my goodness, I just used to what if. It was horrendous. I mean, you name it, my mind would take it and regurgitate it into a future moment problem. It could be the smallest thing, and I would have a scenario of the worst case outcome, or thinking that people were judging me, or thinking that well, if I do that and I go there, people will think this about me, won't they? And then they won't like me, and blah 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 blah. And it was horrendous. It was so limiting. So the first thing is you getting aware. The second thing is good old famous sleep. And if you weren't on last night's call, on last night's live, then I did a full session last night on overcoming sleep deprivation, and I've already had 4 or 5 people contact me from last night who have already implemented some of the tools from last night who slept. So that was just music to my ears. I was so happy for them. So yeah, some great tools in there. If you're not a good sleeper, go and watch the replay and implement the tools. So first thing is awareness, second thing is sleep, third thing is meditate. Now, I am going to talk about meditation tomorrow night. One of my other hats, other than being a coach, is I'm also a meditation teacher. And I spent a lot of time training with some Ashaya monks at the top of a Spanish mountain many years ago, where they taught me the workings of the mind, and then eventually I actually trained and became an Ashaya monk myself. I graduated in 2015, and I now am a teacher of a type of meditation called Ascension, which means to rise above the mind. And I'll pop a link on here, but I'm going to speak in much more detail about that tomorrow night and what massive impact this has had on my life. And you know, there's a lot of people that I've taught and have been taught by other teachers in the UK and globally, and I hear the same thing over and over again, which is it was a game changer. So I'm going to talk more about meditation, and don't panic, because you know, my before I learned to meditate, I had a really bad attitude towards meditation. I was like, oh man, that's not for me. It's too hippie. It's too oh, I don't know, how can someone just sit still for that long, and and all that jazz. Yeah, I was that girl. Anyway, I ate my words after doing the first weekend course, which I'll talk more about tomorrow. So meditation, and the reason why meditation is so good for anxiety and depression is because it teaches you how to become present. Now, you can only be in one place at one time. You can't, no matter who you are, what magician you are, it is impossible for your attention to be anywhere more than one place at one time. It may flip very quickly from past to future to being present, but you can only be in one place at one time. And just as a little tip before I tell you more tomorrow night, stress doesn't live in the present moment. Guess where it lives? Past, future. It doesn't live in the moment, in this present moment here. So if you are somebody with depression and anxiety and you can master how to harness yourself back into the present moment, guess what happens? Yeah, you got it. You got it. Life gets a lot easier. So we're going to talk more about meditation tomorrow, but it's a massive, it's just so good for anxiety and depression. Honestly, it's amazing. The next thing is using the freedom alignment method, which again, if you want more information on that, then hop on tomorrow night. So I'm not going to spend too much time there. But what can you do tonight? Okay, one of the things for depression is that because we tend to have this idea that everything that we do, we make a mess of. It's a real common running commentary of like feeling like your life's a disaster, you've made a mess of it, everything you touch goes wrong, rah. Because that's a really common experience. One of the first things that you can do is to get a paper and pen, my voice is going, to get paper and pen and ask yourself, what would the opposite be, excuse me, what would the opposite be to feeling like your life is going wrong? Right? That's it. Simple. What is the opposite to feeling like your life's going wrong? And then write 3 things down that would be expansive and feel good to you and purposeful and would feel like make you feel alive. So 3 things that you'd love to be able to do. You know, 3 things that would excite you. 3 things that would make you feel like you want to jump out of bed for. Now, it might not be that you can do those things right now, but just 3 things that make you feel really excited. So maybe you're somebody that loves history, or maybe you're somebody like that actually is into cooking, which is not me. Maybe you're somebody who's into fashion or makeup or would like to be. And even if you're not into these things, you've always had a bit of an interest, but you've never really followed it. Or maybe you're somebody who's passionate about consciousness or whatever it might be. But find something. I said 3 things. 1 thing would be fine, to be honest, but something that makes you feel alive, makes you feel excited. And sometimes because we don't often do these sorts of exercises, it can feel difficult. So use your phone and Google it. Google things and just go through a list and find something that makes you feel like, oh, do you know what? I could really like spend some time on that. Maybe it's artwork. Maybe it's, God, I don't know. You could be into anything. The one thing I am going to tell you, though, is because you're human, your mind might be saying, I'm not into anything right now. It's not possible. Every single human being on this planet has been given multiple gifts. Most of us have hidden our gifts because we've got so lost in identifying with our minds and the doom and gloom and the problems that the actual things that make us feel alive and make us feel expansive, we've popped down. So this is your opportunity to be able to just for a moment put some focus back on you and find something that makes you feel alive and excited. And you'll know that it does because it's something that you can just get lost in. So for me, I just love learning about consciousness. Like, I just love it. It's like so fascinates me, and quantum physics and neuroscience. It just, and I never in those words, is just crazy. Like, I didn't even like science at school, but now I'm just like so like, oh my goodness, who am I as a human being? It's amazing, and wow, we're so like multidimensional and expansive, and we can be and become and do whatever we want, and all we've got to do is put our attention on good things, and you know, so that's me. And that's what I love, but what do you love, right? So just in that little shift of you changing your attention from something that's downward spiraling and negative to something that excites you, what happens is a biological shift. Because remember what I said on session 4, that every cell of your body is reacting all day long depending on where your attention goes. So even if you feel like you're in a brick wall around you, right, and you feel like there's no way out, the best thing you can do is just put your attention on something that's not that brick wall for a moment. Put your attention on something that excites you, and it will start to shift your vibration. Maybe very slowly in the beginning, but it will start to shift it. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, the other thing about depression is we quite often feel like our needs aren't being met. What that means is we all have needs. We all have needs that make us feel like we're happy and we're in alignment, and we're not being met because you feel quite often angry and uncomfortable. And so sometimes our needs can be about other people and our relationship with other people. It can be about our relationship to other things, period. So maybe our work, maybe our lives, maybe right now how we're feeling about COVID-19, living in isolation, being in lockdown, maybe homeschooling, trying to pay bills. There will be a lot of things going on, right? And quite honestly, out there, because of the fear, mostly it's not sounding great. And so there's a lot of kind of fodder for us to grab onto to be able to go and start overthinking worst case scenarios. I want you to stop it. I'm not saying don't take actions, because we need to take actions in life, but worrying about things that haven't happened is not going to change your life right now. It's just going to make you feel bad. So stop, right? And ask yourself some simple questions. What needs do I need met? Now, usually if you've got some depression going on, safety is usually one, and usually also it's to do with your relationship to something on the outside world. So a person, it could be work, it could be the current situation, it could be whatever. And if that's the case, right, those needs are what are needed to be met right now. That's okay, that's fine. You're allowed to have those needs met. But what I want you to ask yourself is, what one thing can you do that will allow you to get these needs met that don't involve anyone else right now? So what one thing can I do that will take me a step closer to having my needs met that don't involve anyone else right now? And there's a reason for that. Because one of the things that we don't realise is how powerful we are as a human. And that really does get chucked out the window when we're feeling depressed. We feel powerless, right? We feel like we can't cope. It's one of the big side effects, unfortunately, of depression. But it's not true. You are a multidimensional human being with all the answers and all the power from within you. And this is about reconnecting back inwards and harnessing that relationship with yourself. Because you know what? You are flipping amazing. The chances of you even being born on this planet are 1 to 700 trillion. 1 to 700 trillion, you made it. You're a flipping superstar, rock star, winner already. You got here. So now it's about owning this, right? And realising that you have the power and the strength actually to decide where you put your attention. So start putting your attention on who you want to become, not what you think you aren't. And that starts with this little exercise. Who do you want to become, right? You're amazing. So you might be listening to me now going, she's flipping raged. No, I'm not amazing. I don't feel amazing. I feel depressed. That's okay, right? I don't mind. You can call me raged. But what I want you to do is I just want you to just find one thing that you would like to become as a person that's going to enhance your life as who you are, make you become even more aligned with the truth of who you can become. And it might be one small step, like, do you know what I'd like to become is I would like to feel more confident from within. I'd like to feel more connected with myself. I'd like to feel more like I like myself. And if that's the case, right, then it starts by you doing one thing for you. And that's not selfish. In fact, it's selfless, because if you look after you, you can help way more people. If you don't look after you, you can't help anyone, because you've got too much time trying to sort yourself out. So one thing, and I really strongly advise, it kind of starts with just putting your focus on just love, because love conquers all. And whether you feel love or not, it doesn't matter. Just focus on it and spend a minute every single day just focusing on what it feels like to feel love inside your heart. And if you can't get there, then put some music on that makes you feel like inspired or makes you feel alive. Or just like put on something on YouTube that makes you feel like, oh, that feels lovely. Find something to help you reach that state so that you can feel it, and just keep going with it. I promise you, the more familiar you get with these things, the more it becomes your norm. Deal? Okay, fab, you're doing great. And then finally, the last thing is that on day 1 and 2, I did speak about anxiety a lot, so I'm not going to give you too many tips on that. You can go back to that one and find the tips for that. But finally is remembering that I promise you that on the other side of these experiences, on the other side of anxiety and the other side of depression, which, by the way, can totally and utterly be changed by you addressing the cause rather than the actual symptoms of this, that you are an unbelievable creator of this planet, and you can create whatever life you want, but it starts by you grabbing back your power from this moment and taking those little steps that I've just shared now. It don't have to be big steps, just little steps. And if you do this, you will very, very quickly start to feel like a totally different human being. That I promise. So if you want any more information on this, then come back tomorrow night, because I am going to talk to you about the Freedom Alignment Method and meditation and the whole solution of this 7 days. But also, I've got a website, kirstybortoff.co.uk. Please go on there. There's a free masterclass on anxiety and stress, which you can download for free. I've also got a YouTube channel called The Mindset Coach. Please do come and follow me and subscribe. Other than that, have an amazing evening, and I love you all lots. And you know what? Never, ever, ever, ever stop remembering how perfect and wonderful and powerful you are as a human, because you absolutely are. Mwah! Take care. Speak to you tomorrow.